get this recording because we will record this first session and post that online for those that couldn't make it. And yeah, so just to begin, I'm Chris Winter, and I'm the technical manager for track and field with BC Athletics. And welcome to tonight's webinar titled Effective Coaching and Leadership Strategies for the High Performance Coach. Sorry, I'm just seeing another chat come through. Just make sure everybody can hear me okay. Got it. Okay, John can hear us. That's great. Good job, John.
Oh, good.
As you guys are all aware, this is part one of a three-part series that we're looking at doing with Dr. Shaunna Taylor here, looking at doing one per month. And the whole concept is that hopefully things will build off of each other. And Shaun and I were talking a little bit before we started here this evening about trying to get some feedback from all you attendees tonight. I'll send out a webinar in the next 24 hours or so and try to get some feedback about some of the different themes that were touched on tonight as a bit of an intro session, and then kind of get some feedback in terms of what themes coaches are interested in exploring for our next couple of sessions. If we don't get any, that's fine. Shaunna can talk for days on leadership strategies and stuff, so we're not worried about it. But if there's anything in particular that you guys are keen to explore, we're happy to make that a big part of our future sessions here. So again, welcome to tonight, and hopefully you guys enjoy tonight's session and are willing to come back a couple more times as we get ourselves into the winter months. The plan and the format for today's session is about a 45-minute presentation from Shaunna here, and then we'll follow up with a few minutes of Q&A. Ideally, questions can be answered in the chat box. We've muted you guys just so we don't have people talking over one another. So hopefully the chat function works well for everybody. As well, if you're having any technical difficulties, feel free to type those into the chat box. And again, I'll try to help. Can't make any promises, but hopefully everyone is well versed in these online webinar meetings. We've done lots of them in the last 6 months or so. And as I mentioned, the webinar will be recorded. We'll post it to our YouTube account, and happy to circulate that as well to people if they want to see it. I'll send it out to everyone that registered this time. And then I think that's it for probably housekeeping stuff. I'll move on with introducing Shaunna here. Dr. Shaunna Taylor is a certified clinical counselor who serves as the chair of the Canadian Sports Psychology Association and is an adjunct professor at the University of British Columbia at the School of Kinesiology with their master's certificate program for high performance coaching and technical leadership. Having studied at the University of Ottawa, she has over 20 years of experience consulting and providing athlete and coach support from grassroots sport through to high performance, including the Olympic and Paralympic Games. She has experience serving as an integrated support member of 6 Olympic and 4 Paralympic Games, and she brings decades of experience to athletes and coaches looking to develop their mental flexibility. She currently serves as a mental performance service provider to Ballet Kelowna, athlete and coach services at Pacific Sport Okanagan, as well as the Canadian Centre for Mental Health in Sport. Not sure how she does it all, but let's everyone welcome Shaunna to this evening. And yeah, take it away there, Shaunna.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Well, I was thrilled when you reached out and asked if I wanted to speak on in this series. And we talked about how leadership is really the foundation for coaches. Your leadership style, your leadership approach is the foundation, and it's the way you move through life. You are your program. And so we thought the logical point to start would be talking about your leadership. For some of you, I recognize your names, and you've either been in my class or I've actually worked with you. Some of you have already gone through the advanced coaching diploma, so you're well versed, and you may have already explored your own leadership style and some of the model that I'm going to use here tonight. But hopefully there'll be some new pieces that you can pick up. And I'll be giving some examples of ideas that will remind you if it's been a while since you went through those 5 leadership practices. And we can take some of these learnings into some feedback that Chris is going to send out so we can form the next 2 webinars as well. So I'll kick things off with really discussing the foundations, these effective leadership strategies. There are 5 of them in total. And we're going to be going through each one this evening. Feel free to jot down if there are any notes or any questions later. I think, Chris, the format we're going to do the presentation. And are they free to then put the questions in the chat box along the way, and then we're going to refer back to them after? Or yeah,
we can pick them up along the way. If
Sure.
you're okay, I can interrupt you if it's one of those things that seems like it's really relevant to the content we're talking about. Otherwise, I might save it to the end. So we'll just see how it goes. And we did have a question about slides being provided. Shaunna, are you okay with providing slides afterwards?
Sure, absolutely. I'll PDF it too, and I'll reduce it so they don't take up a bunch of space. And I'll give you that version, Chris, and you can send out to everyone.
Perfect.
Sounds
Okay.
good. Excellent. So, yeah, just talking too about sessions 2 and 3. Again, we want to cater this series to you, the coach, and what you need and what you're looking for in this time. But I just wanted to share with all of you something that we have been working on, the sports psychology community and mental health and mental performance community. A massive survey was sent out by the Olympic Committee, and it was pretty unanimous that the biggest challenge that our athletes are facing right now during this COVID-19 pandemic is really their mental health. So it could be that there are lots of different topics that folks are looking for the second and third parts of the series. But certainly something to bear in mind is this is what we're seeing in terms of international trends. But again, for tonight, we're going to be focused on exemplary leadership practice. I'm hoping that you're going to be reflecting throughout. So you're going to see a topic or an idea or maybe something provocative, thinking about, how does this affect me, something that I can do, and then take that away for your programs and your practice, wherever you're here from. I was excited to hear that we have folks from out of province as well. So that's really exciting that we've got folks from all over Canada. So love this quote. Pretty simple, but pretty true, from Jim KOUZES, one of the 2 founders of the LPI, or the Leadership Practices Inventory, that I'm going to go through tonight. The question isn't whether I will make a difference. It's more like, well, what difference will I make? We know you as leaders are the difference makers in your programs. I always say coaches are the pillar of the sport performance ecosystem. You're the pillars, you're the culture setters. And leadership plays a critical role. We know this whether we're looking at literature in sports psychology, sports sociology, exercise science, performance science, that leadership has such a critical role in a program, and whether your program is successful or less successful or failure. And again, even that success and failure, those are subjective terms too. So it depends how you judge your own program. These are the leadership strategies. We're going to go through all 5 tonight, and we're going to drill down into each one of them and what they represent and some of the things that you might want to take away or build out in your practice, and potentially that we could talk about further in our second and third in the series. So modeling the way, inspiring a shared vision for your program, challenging the process or the status quo and how things are done right now, whether it's in your program or the broader ecosystem that you compete in, enabling others to act around you, and then finally encouraging the heart. These are all taken from 5th, and now there is a 6th edition of the Leadership Challenge. It's available on Amazon. You can buy it new or used. There are many free resources as well online if you don't want to make as significant an investment. But I've had a lot of success with this program, been using it now going on 8 or 9 years, and it's been generally well received by all of the coaches from a wide variety of sports that I work on it with. So the first element in this leadership practices inventory, or this exemplary leadership, is modeling. So model the way. And this is probably the biggest, just like it says, modeling. So it's a reflection of you. So what I usually, when I'm working with coaches, or if I've been brought into a team environment to help the coach and develop this concept of modeling the way, or their value statement, and they're making sure that their values align with their actions. This is one place where we kick things off. And in my course at UBC, as Chris knows well, since he did this exercise himself, making sure that those organizational and personal values are congruent. So they work together, there's synergy there, and that what you're saying and what you're doing are aligned and can be demonstrated to your athletes and those that are all around you. So what does that look like? How do we know if our values are aligned? How do we know if we have credibility? Well, given that you are your program, and if you're saying a message, or it's posted somewhere, it's on your website, or it's on a t-shirt, We know also from the literature, from both business, education sectors, and other sectors, that if the user group or your followers, your membership, don't believe in you, the leader, they likely are going to be pretty skeptical about the message. So, and then further to that, looking at some of the studies, and I have, what I could maybe do too for some of the other sessions, I could put together some suggested reading lists, is the leaders that show that they have emotional intelligence and care about whether it's their employees, if it's more of a business literature, or their athletes in the sport literature. If you care first and with gusto, with enthusiasm, the performance comes. So knowing that that caring is there, knowing that that part of your message, that duty of care to your athletes, truly is a foundation on which you build your program. We know that those programs tend to be more successful in the long run. So successful in retention, successful in terms of long-term performance outcomes, experience less injury. So it's not just the lovey-dovey kumbaya moments. There's a lot of science behind why this is a really important leadership practice that leads to higher performance and sustained performance. What does credibility look like? I can't answer this question for any of the coaches and athletes that I work with. So I really try to get this reflected back on them. This is their homework. This is the work. So having that head coach get together with the assistant coaches, or could be a leadership core from each of their event groups, and coming up with a combined or a united value statement, what principles they stand by, what that code of ethics looks like. We've all got codes of ethics. We've signed them. We've got codes of conduct. We've got reams of documents and PDFs that are embedded on our websites, but how often do we actually look at them? How often do we think about how that displays in our everyday performance and training environment? So we say we do this, but what does it look like? And it's the what does it look like part, I think, that's missing. So it isn't that we lack leadership in coaching, in the soul of coaching. I think though where we get some of the disconnect is between these values and principles and what they look like in our actions, and pressure and cutbacks and stress can all lead in this gentle creep away from the values that we started with when we were young and naive, and and the world was our oyster and everything was rosy. And then real life hit us and we realized how tough this job was. So making sure that the credibility is built on. I'm sure many of you on this call have taken the Making Ethical Decisions basic training through the National Coaching Certification. So you know the 6 steps in the Making Ethical Decisions process. You know intellectually that this is what it looks like, but having the reminders, taking time as your leadership core and going through the MED process, especially when you're hit with a critical incident or you're in a situation of conflict. This is really valuable material. So hopefully if some of you still have that on hand from when you took the course, or if you haven't taken it yet or you're interested in doing so, readily available. And this has been coming up a ton in the news lately when we look at where we have faltered in sport in regards to the duty of care that we owe our athletes in keeping them safe, in keeping them healthy, and the golden rule. So if we have any concerns about this, we are always pushing the boundaries in high performance sport. We know this. We know that we're pushing the boundaries of pain. We're pushing the boundaries of every possible human experience in reaching for excellence. So it's a delicate balancing act, but again, basing it on the MED and making sure that we've got that alignment there in the modeling of the way. Those core values are supposed to drive our action. So what are your causes? What do you stand for? What do you value? What do your athletes stand for? What are they committed to? And are you committed to that too? What moves them? What moves you? When you take all those things away, you're an administrator. When you incorporate all those things into your daily performance environment, that's leadership. So we got enough administration in our jobs. It's probably our least favorite part of the job. So let's go back to the passion part. Let's go back to the core values. Let's go back to the leadership piece. Sport, we know more than ever, COVID-19 has been a microscope on social injustice. It has also been an amazing microscope that has blown up the opportunity for sport to lead in social change. So whether it is in ethnocultural and race relations, we have a cross-country runner here with a very powerful symbol on murder and missing Indigenous women, to the Black Lives Matter movement, to tackling homophobia. This was an issue, I don't know if anyone followed it, in Glasgow 2020 by a race walker, an absolutely foul scenario, an example of homophobia by a volunteer in athletics, and really coming down swiftly, cleanly, and with no room for interpretation, that this was not something that this culture would stand for. And then finally, of course, diverse abilities and the Paralympic movement, and making sure we've got the accessibility. So all of us have these really rich biographies. We're passionate about the diversity and inclusion and the social rupture, but also the unity that sport can bring. And that gets me really excited, because athletics is one of the most spectacular sports in the world. And I think it has so much potential in this area with principled leadership. So that's modeling the way. So you being that visionary, you being that role model that your athletes look to, that those coaches that look up to you, and the staff that looks to you as a guide. The second being inspiring a shared vision. So it can't just be you. You're not alone. You're not on an island. You can't do it all yourself. But inspiring that shared vision, this is where the power comes. And this is where the coaches will tell me they can tell when this is starting to take shape and it's starting to permeate and the ripples are happening and their assistant coaches and volunteers and parents are falling in line and we're all sort of joining together. This is when the excitement and the energy starts to take shape in performance. We know that our future is going to look diverse. We know that we want it to be meaningful. I love this picture from a local meet here, Jack Brow. And if any of you have ever been to it, please come the next opportunity we have to host it. We'd love to host you. Where that exciting future, who's going to be in that vision with you? So figure out who's on my team, or if they're not there yet, where are the gaps? So I've got all these great things. I'm missing the promotion piece, or I've got this, this, and this. I need that great administrative kind of the logistics mind. Where are those gaps? Who's on that team, or who isn't quite there yet on the team? We know that the athletes need to see it. They need to see themselves in your program. They need to see themselves reflected somehow in the potential that what you, the coach, can give them. So they need to see, feel, and they have to have access to the visible role models. And we know that you can't be all things to all people. We know you can't have all of them in your program. But Chris and I were just talking about this earlier, but some of them are available via Zoom, the magic of Zoom. So even if they're not in your region, you reach out to your buddy that's over in that other club who's got that amazing athlete or that leader that has a really cool story that's so similar to that athlete that you're working with. Let's use technology. I never even thought about all these people that I'd be connecting with over these last 6 months, and done so economically and been so moved by people's really truly amazing heart in wanting to be part of solutions and doing it sometimes for free or really nominal charge because it's the right thing to do. So finding those role models, where are they, who are they? And here's another great example, another interior example in Kamloops and Dillon, and working with the Indigenous Sport and Recreation Council and putting money where his mouth is and really expanding both the athlete pool, but also the scope of the leadership that sport can bring. So within mainstream sport and Indigenous sport, figuring out the connections. Where is there room for us to grow our sport? What are our partners that we're missing? Where's the deeper meaning that we can take with our sport? So much more than numbers and times. It's so much more. And so how can we maximize that as coaches? We know it isn't just influence, We know that leadership is trying to paint the picture. It's giving them the blueprint of the house you're building and just imagining the living room, imagining their dream bedroom, imagining what it could be like in 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. That takes a lot of vision. It takes a lot of perseverance. But what are we missing in the painting of the picture? We live in a really add water and stir, I want this yesterday, instantaneous environment. We know that's not how you build athletes. That's not how you build legacy or long-term performance development systems. We know it takes time. So what are some examples of programs that have started to build that legacy? Where did they start? How did they paint that picture? Can we use them actually as an aspirational picture, even if it doesn't exist where we are right now? So beyond the influence, how do we let them know what we want to build? And how do we get them to grab a hammer and join us? How do we encourage those around us? What kind of incentives do you have in your program? And how can we make our provincial associations and regional clubs and of course our country shine? What do the people need? What are we missing? So taking an inventory of the things that we already have and that we can keep doing, but also are there gaps, and are there others around us that we maybe haven't thought to ask to lend their expertise or some of their resources to share? And this one always gets an interesting reaction when I say the last statement. So looking around, who surrounds you right now? So who is your current core team and maybe some of that peripheral team? And how do you know if they're with you? And how do you know if they aren't with you? And by with you, I mean really, truly on your team. So they're looking for the same success markers that you are, however you've defined them as a program. What does loyalty look like? What does building team in your leadership core look like? Have you done one in a while? Is it time maybe for one? Have folks gotten really mired down in their own wacky workloads, and it's probably time to do that and take a look around and see who's still with me, who I still feel is with me. And if I feel like they're not, are there some folks that they're looking for a reason to move on to the next project, or are there some that just need to be asked to come back in a meaningful way again? So that's our job as leaders, to figure that out. So those are the first two, and moving on to the third. So challenging the process. This is where we look at the status quo and we start thinking about doing things differently, potentially. Doesn't mean you throw babies out with the bathwater, but it means that we need to really take a look at what our current talent development system looks like, what our coach development system looks like, what our resource chain looks like, what some of our, maybe the revenue model looks like, how we maintain that volunteer core that props up all the parts of performance that are essential, and what does that look like? So we know that COVID-19 has been a nightmare in so many ways to our sector. It has shut down a lot of face-to-face, very, very intimate training environments and competitions. But as we were saying earlier, it has opened up the opportunity for innovation. It's opened up virtual connections. It's created truly a world stage that's been made very small inside these screens, and for the first time probably ever, a lot more affordable at getting world-class expertise and joining forces with folks that used to be such huge barriers and boundaries to accessing. So now we've hit the pause button in a lot of ways. Is it time to potentially experiment for some smaller wins, or to be able to take a look at things that we know weren't working before and blow them up or transform them into something that can work for this COVID period, but then could emerge even stronger once we're able to have the full access? We know that also it's caused a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of fear in the unknown of what's next. And we know that this isn't all that different from all kinds of other challenges and eras that we've faced in our sector and beyond. So we know many of the highest achievers had to come through the same uncertainty and fear to reach those success markers later. So what's that going to look like for you to be able to push beyond that? And so something to think about too is when we've got those constraints and now we're forced to make a decision, and it could be a decision that's forced by the hand of a budget, a more restrictive budget, or geography. We end up, so an example, what I mean here, leading to too much too soon decisions, it might be putting a coach in a position of leadership or a role or jurisdiction they really aren't ready for because of these constraints. And we don't have the supports in place to help mentor them or to give them the proper training or to create some parameters for success. So making sure that each of these decisions, if we can double it up with some in-kind support and making sure that those constraints don't lead to too much too soon decisions. We also want to make sure that if we're going to have to make some of those tough decisions, and hopefully we've got a good support plan around them, that we also build some kind of accountability plan too. So how do we know if something isn't working? How do we know if one of our co-coaches or a volunteer or one of our event group and an athlete leadership core that we've created, what are the measures by which we know something's working or not? We can't just say, well, it just isn't working. Well, if we didn't lay it out in advance, what we were hoping to achieve by that, if we didn't have hopefully a common entente of what we're looking for, and maybe that's a brainstorm session all its own so that you can come up with that accountability framework. I think that's another piece that we're not great at in sport. We like to be really aspirational, but we don't really have sometimes some of the framework in place if things go south. So in other words, what needs to change? What might need to be enhanced in terms of the accountability so that then when we have to have that difficult conversation with that young mentee coach, say, well, remember when we talked 6 months ago and we talked about you taking this training group on and we said that X, Y, and Z were going to be really important. Well, X and Y are happening and Z isn't. And we already discussed it. We've got it down there. It's something that we're able to say in black and white was part of the deal. So that's just one off-the-cuff example of an accountability framework. And knowing that we want them to make mistakes. We actually want this. We want to send them off to that competition, even though it's sort of a stretch type competition and dream. They're just barely into that level, but we know that they'll never know unless they go. They've got to go and they've got to experience it in order to feel that crushing competitive anxiety ahead of time. They can't just keep running that local meet because we know that they need to be pushed into this uncomfortable situation. We want them to make mistakes. We want them to have experiences of a lack of success. There are different types of mistakes that we want them to make. And I really like this model and concept from Growth Mindset. I know I use this a lot in my course. It was a buzzword for many years, but I'd like to believe that it started to infuse itself in the DNA of a lot of sport programs now, having a different way of looking at failure and looking at praise. And so you'll see on the left-hand side, you've got a continuum of high to even higher learning opportunity in making a mistake, and then making one with intention or lack of intention. So we want those higher level smart mistakes when you might have lacked the info or skill or understanding, but you got that new learning out of it, or the stretch mistake where it was intentional. We knew that we were going to send them. We knew that it was going to likely result in something a little out of their range, but we know that they're going to be able to get to that next level by having taken part in it. So we really want and of course the high stakes mistakes, those are getting into really bad risk management, and we want to avoid those at all costs. And the sloppy mistakes are just going to happen because we're humans. But if we can try to stick up in that green zone and explain to our athletes as we're going through pushing to new levels and trying new experiences or trying a new event, for example, or a new distance, a new discipline, a new role on the team, making sure that we've built in these intentional and high learning opportunity mistakes into our leadership style, we're going to have a lot more success, I think, in the long run. So top 3 leadership practices, and then extending into enabling others to act. So this is where you're taking, you as a leader, you are, you know, an embodiment, you model your program, you've challenged the process, and at the same time, we got to give power away. And it's a really hard thing for coaches to do. I think it's one of the toughest things that a lot of coaches struggle with, is that paradox of power. The more, you know, you give away, the more you end up getting back, and the more buy-in you get. If you're in that kind of principled leadership where you've got that transformational, sometimes some of you will have more transactional leadership style too, and we'll maybe talk about that in a future session too. But enabling others to act is really core principle in the LPI. Fostering collaboration by building trust and strong relationships is really the backbone of this particular pillar. So making sure that those strong athlete-coach relationships, but also the coach-coach relationships as well, coach-administrator, coach-volunteer, all of those other, that army that is right there beside you and behind you and in front of you, that are all part of it. It's all about, what's that? My husband always says, it's all about relationships. He's a consultant, he works with government. It's all about relationships. But it is all about, literally is all about relationships. So this particular pillar talks a lot about the types of relationships and how we need to give that power and trust away in order to get it. The amount of trust in our leadership and in our program and the decision making directly correlates to the amount of influence you have and the effort that is put in by your athletes or your members, your user groups. And in my course, I like to talk about my coaches asking right now, if you called this little meter here that's on this particular slide, the trust meter, you know, where would it be? And would it be high trust in you among your staff? So in your team, in your organization, in your leadership style as the staff, and what would that look like if we were to ask your athletes, what does that trust meter look like? And if you're really not sure, and it's a little bit uncomfortable to think about it, maybe it's time to do an audit and find out what that looks like. And so that could be any number of, it could be a good old sit down over coffee type audit, or it could be a pen and paper or a digital feedback questionnaire. It could be going to some peer leaders that you trust in your athletes and saying, I really want to know how we can work together and have the most, you know, trusting and collaborative team we possibly can. I'm sensing there's work to be done there. And I extend the trust to you to meet with that group and to bring it back to me and let me know how we can be part of that. And sometimes you might want even to be part of that group, but also letting them go and do that and trust that that's going to be a constructive exercise too. So the trust audit is uncomfortable, but it is really important, I think, especially when we're in troubled waters and when we're trying to restore faith in a sector that honestly, our sector has taken some pretty big hits in recent months. I would say even the last couple of years, with all forms of abuse and maltreatment of both athletes, but also of staff, because there's reciprocity there and it goes two ways. So this one is a really critical piece for me. We also need to think about trust when we think about growing that athlete pool and we think about sharing and what is the best thing for that athlete. So when I'm working with some sports, they are very migratory and some of them naturally build athlete pools that migrate, that come from multi-sport background, or come from a background where they have very versatile abilities. And we know that in the sport of athletics, versatility is what you do. I mean, run, jump, throw is the basis of all movement. I think you could argue, with the exception of maybe artistic gymnastics, if we blend artistic with run, jump, throw, we have an amazing athlete. So I'm always saying, all of my athletes, no matter what sport they take, they need to take run, jump, throw. You need to join your local track club in your formative years. And what that also means, though, is that we need to think about what's right for our athletes. So sometimes they start out with us, we develop them all the way through, we get them to the cusp of high performance, and we recognize, I have a secret thrower here, or I have a secret sprinter, or I have a secret middle distance runner. And the same thing happens when I'm working with cycling, or I'm working in hockey, for example, and they'll tell me, you check this guy's power output on the bike. I mean, this is unbelievable. He's in the wrong sport. And so we know that athlete recruitment is just one example of how the trust and how our system doesn't function well with sharing. We do a lot of trade secrets. We do a lot of information hoarding in high performance sport, all in the name of competition. But I believe that if we have at our core, we want what is best for the athlete, then we know that it could be that we may need to let them go, or there is another coach that is better suited to take them on that journey. So there are some sports that do it within intra-sport. So ski cross and other ski disciplines, and freestyle, for example, with the gymnastics community. And then triathlon, of course, is 3 sports in one. So having to build trust, boundaries, and transparency can be a big challenge in all those sports, in any sport for that matter. But maybe just thinking about what that might look like. What do we use to retain our athletes? But also, do we have an open door for them to explore what is best for them and the environment that is best for them? So just one more thing to think about. And also, how in touch are you with what they do? You still have a mullet? I don't know, Chris. It's hard to know what you had once upon a time. But this one slide just because I had to put these ridiculous outfits and hairdo up. But also just thinking about, you know, at one point things seemed really hip and happening for all of us in the moment. It just seemed like it was where it was at. But in sport, things keep moving. And we've got to make sure that we are refreshing. We are on top of our coach development and education. We have a depth and breadth of diverse voices that are informing our practice. And we're also listening to the youth that we're coaching and making sure that we are staying in touch with what they need. They don't need, you know, business in the front, party in the back. They don't need this hairstyle. They definitely don't need 1975 shorts. These shorts do not need to come back again, even though I have seen these around in 2020, okay? And I've definitely seen the socks.
Fashion is cyclical, right? It's going to come back.
Totally cyclical. You know what? I should have kept all of my headbands and my wristbands. They're all coming back. Who knew? But just thinking about staying current and making sure that our athletes are part of that. For those of us that have been around a while, yeah, we've been doing this a really long time. We have a wealth of experience, but we don't know what it is to be an 18-year-old today. We just don't. We don't know what it is to be 23, to be 28, to be 35 and a brand new leader. So we have to always be willing, no matter what stage of our career development we're in, to respect and really listen. So what does our team think and desire? Again, the trust audit. Reach out. What do you need? Am I still meeting those needs? Am I still part of that conversation? Am I sure that I have those informal communication channels like the grapevine working for me? And do I have a finger on the leadership in my team and my athlete development core to know where they're at as well? And so top 4. And now on the home stretch of 5 of 5 of the leadership practices, and this is probably one of my favorites, because this is why we do it. We do it for the heart. At least it sure as heck why I do it, because it sure isn't for the money in amateur sport. I wish it was because it's so lucrative. But it is tremendously rewarding. I know that sport changes lives. I know that the coaches that I've worked with over the years, they're lifelong friends. I mean, these people are family. So how do we make sure? The fifth pillar really provides nourishment for the other four. You know, the mirror of the model in you leads on the front end of 5 or number 1, and then the heart brings up the end of the race. So do you yourself need encouragement? You know, and who do you have as a mentor or a sounding board? Who is your personal board of directors that you can draw on and that you trust implicitly to give you that support when you need it? We all need it. And this is something, you know, whether it's forming something that's formal, like a community of practice, and it could be even something virtual where you meet online and you have some kind of regular check-ins, or it's that Saturday run that you have with a colleague of yours, or it's a coffee once a month with a team of coaches and other colleagues that you've come across, whether it's in or outside of sport, that have amazing ideas. So what does that look like? The encouragement for you, and then also how are you doing this for your team? Because you can bet that everybody could use it. What's your encouragement style? How do you acknowledge, would someone who works for you know when they've done a great job? What would that look like? How do you let them know? How would your athlete know? Is it just outcomes? Is it effort? Is it perseverance? Is it all of the above? And is it tailored based on their individual needs? And I know it's a lot to ask, but this is the lifeblood. The fifth pillar is the lifeblood, really, I think, of our leadership style. And it's the batteries in the machine. The Olympic Committee has sent out all kinds of inspirational imagery over the last month since the Olympic postponement and all the ups and downs and tribulations of COVID have thrown our program all over the place. And one of the themes is it's time to be strong. And I agree, it's time to be strong. But anyone who's worked with me knows that I don't like always using the cliche of being mentally tough or mentally strong. I like using mentally flexible, because we can't be strong all the time. Sometimes we have to be unsure, and just the same, we have to adapt, and that takes flexibility. So flexibility is something that everyone can be, and we can be strong, and we can be flexible. And what would that look like in you? And how do you convey that message to your team so they know that they can come to you if they're not feeling strong? Then what do we need to do in order to get them the support or encouragement or whatever that is that they need? The highest performing leaders, and this from business literature, but also taken from education literature and into high performance sport literature for the long term. And I'm talking about highest performing leaders that have a long and consistent, and by long, I think it was 15 plus years of performance without a revolving door, have the openness, the approachability, have more affection, passion, positivity, and are more grateful and encouraging. And this is across a scale looking at where someone falls on the transactional versus transformational leadership style. And my colleague, Wade Gilbert, has done a lot of work in this area in the US at Fresno State University in California. And this is something that I firmly believe, and it's played out in all the inventory of coaches that I've ever known through the years. So I guess deciding where we place ourselves on that continuum of which of these qualities on here do we maybe need to work on. We can't be all things to all people, and I'm not saying that you need to be Mother Teresa by any stretch of the imagination. You've got your own needs too, and you've got your unique feisty self. But taking a look at some of these words that I've highlighted in these qualities, and they can be taught and they can be coached as well, and they can be cultivated throughout a lifetime as a lifelong learner. And we also, as coaches, have things that drive us around the bend. So there are going to be those coaches, all of us, that you've got that one type of athlete, or maybe there's several, that really get under your skin because your biography and personality type and theirs are like oil and water. So and it doesn't mean that you can't care about them. It doesn't mean that you can't respect and know that you want to get them from A to B, but it is going to be exceptionally challenging for you and probably for them as a result. So what are your various kryptonites? These are usually the fireside chats that I'll have with coaches. What do I do about this personality type? It's the difficult, the challenging ones that are also the most interesting. And so are you aware of your biases? Have you ever talked about it with anyone? Have you ever written it down? Have you ever addressed it in any way to figure out what you can do about your coaching style in reaching that type of athlete? Or it could be your teammate too. And finally, you can't encourage the heart if your own needs pretty significant repairs. We know that leader burnout is real. It's a thing. I felt it myself. I felt it really strongly myself in around 2018, so a couple years ago. And like Chris said, I wear a few hats: professor, private practice, but also an executive director of a not-for-profit sports center. And I realized in that executive director role was the place where I felt the most alone and where I needed the most support. So I reached out to two networks, one being local, of a network of executive directors in the central Okanagan that meet once a month or sometimes virtually. We attend each other's events, we go for coffee. And then another network that is across Canada, virtual and online, and you can send in questions and key issues that you're having, and I get like 20 answers when I send it in there from people all over the place that I've never even met, but are feeling such a kindred spirit to the challenge that I'm facing in not-for-profit sport. It's been amazing. So have you ever experimented with a network like that to encourage your own heart and to work on your own potential burnout or gaps that you might need for yourself? And just to touch base on what I mentioned earlier about the stretch mistakes and the growth mindset. If you haven't already seen this model and done some work on it, maybe read up on it, Carol Dweck's work in the realm of praise and how we give praise and honor praise and success, and making errors, and how we approach skills, challenges, effort, feedback, and setbacks are sort of the key components to this model. I would strongly recommend reading up on it and taking a closer look at how this might manifest in your daily performance environment too. So I believe I got through all 5. So look at that. And I'm pretty close on the time, Chris. You told me 45 minutes out. Okay, I went 5 minutes over, but you gotta admit.
I think that was perfect because I took 5 minutes for the intro at the beginning, and you got 45. That leaves us with a couple minutes here for any Q&A that might come through. But that was amazing, and I have to say thank you, Shaunna, because presenting in this format it has its challenges where you're just kind of speaking and you're not getting a lot of feedback from the audience. So I'm hoping that everyone enjoyed that. I know I did. But it's not easy. And I know that's some of the challenges I've heard from talking to different people that do presentations, or whether it's our teachers that are in school right now, and the challenges that come with that, where you're just a talking head and you're not able to get the feedback from the audience, which is what you usually get and crave when you're doing these things in person. So thank you for that. I know it was, I've been through your class before, but hearing it for a second time is always a good thing, and picking up on a few things there. And the real takeaway for me, I know, was just looking at what the coaches need. I mean, I know we spend so much time as coaches or administrators thinking about what the athletes need, but the coaches, especially in our sport, maybe in all sports, I mean, a lot of times they are a bit of an island, and they may have assistant coaches, but for the most part, usually they're doing it on their own. And I see these coaches as being sponges, where they're constantly absorbing other people's problems and not necessarily have a place to go and dish it out and connect with other people. So I think you touched on that quite a bit. And I know that was a big takeaway for me. But yeah, we do have a few minutes here if anyone does have any questions.
I see one in the chat room here too. I see one. in the chat about an example, wanting an example of giving power away. And can I give an example of what that looks like? So when I mentioned the paradox of power, a real simple one would be having your athletes decide what their warm-up looked like, having your athletes decide what the day's schedule would be in a training camp. So it could be as small or as large as you'd like, but sort of giving some of that decision-making away. We call it autonomy supportive coaching. So autonomy supportive, supporting their ability to be independent and to be part of the solution building means you're giving some of that decision-making power away. You're giving some of that godlike status that you have as a head or assistant coach away to your athlete, or with you as the head coach, giving some of that away to your assistants, giving that away to a mentee who is just starting out and who's a little anxious about it, but would love the opportunity to be able to prove themselves with a new technique or a new style of something. So giving it away in order to get the buy-in and the understanding that you care about them. So that would be.
And then there's one from Jerry there. I don't know if you can see it there.
Do you find that you're modeling the way even when you're not trying to model? Oh, I think you're modeling even when you, I mean, you're always a model, Jerry. I mean, given that you're so fashionable as well. I mean, that's a given. But yes, I think you are pretty much, you are your program 24/7, whether you like it or not. And I think it's something for us to think about. We can't just switch it on or off. There are times where we don't want to be, we want to break, but it's sort of like with parenting, same deal, right? There's days I don't want to be a parent, but I gotta be. And it's just, it comes with the territory. With great power comes great responsibility, right, Jerry? The Spider-Man quote. So, got to embrace it, but totally agreed. Yes, no place to hide. Yes. And then in the context of a growth mindset, can you talk about the differences between safety versus comfort? So let's see. Yeah, so safety, maybe, I don't know, I'm not really sure how
So
to.
yeah, are they not the same thing? To me, that's what safety and comfort would almost be the same, where you're not taking risks.
Yeah, comfort is one. Comfort, I think, is subjective. Safety is kind of a moral imperative. So if we don't want to throw our athlete off a cliff, and at the same time we're going for trail runs, and there might be some heights to it, and it's not going to be in their comfort zone, but we know 100% that the trail is offset far enough off the cliff, there are safety rails, and they're good to go. So the difference between comfort being we're pushing limitations, but the safe is that sort of not that. So people need to feel safe to experiment and make mistakes, but their comfort zone needs to be challenged. Yeah, that's better. That's what you're getting at. Absolutely, I totally agree with what you've said there. So that's the problem with our language, is every word has some legal terms, and has some legal terms, and then also has sort of the social or colloquial terms. But I agree, you have to, being inside your comfort zone is not where you make the stretch mistakes. So that slide that I had on, and it doesn't even have to be like you're saying here in the context of a mistake. It could just be in the context of the way that you create a training environment. It could be a little uncomfortable because they're pushing in that moment, or it's going to be pushing a pain threshold to a new place, or pushing their ability to manage outside distractions, things like that. No, it's not going to be a perfect environment. We're opening it up to the public, and you're going to have a ton of people coming and going and watching you, and spectators yelling and all those things. So I agree. I think we need to find the sweet spot in between, where we've got our athletes kind of on the edge of the comfort zone, but always under the auspices of feeling safe to, I like how you put it here, safe to experiment. That's a good one. I have an athlete who has a water off the back of a duck attitude. So I'm always wondering, mental stability, seems to have a relaxed attitude, always wondering about his mental stretch. always reaching out, how wonderful he is, etc. So do you feel like he might be, so what you're asking here is you're wondering, is he really that laid back, or is he just afraid to tell you the truth? Is that kind of what you're questioning? Could someone really be that laid back? Could someone really be that adjusted? Some people truly are. I know it's a miracle, and they're few and far between. Some really are just that adaptable. And then some athletes are masking. And this is the tough one, is when they're masking. One way to get at masking is if you've got the power imbalance of coach athlete, is asking someone in the same power zone that they're in. So asking a teammate, asking a close friend, if you have access to those folks. And it doesn't have to be accusatory, more like, I care about you. Oh, your challenge of 37 years of coaching. Yeah. That's, you might have to use various techniques to get in there and see. Family too is another great source, because if there's a track record of this, no, pardon the pun, probably this is something they've seen before as well. So they'd be able to know there's going to be a leak somewhere. And that would be my advice, is trying to get in there. And the other way would be just to have someone, if you have access to someone who's doing, could be a mental performance consultant or someone on the sports site, doesn't communicate to the family. Oh, that makes it more
questions here, but I think a lot of the stuff we can take and take forward into our next couple sessions. So if that's okay.
Yeah, they're actually, some of these here are great, because the one on, essentially they're talking about performance anxiety and choking. I was hoping that we could cover in one of our future sessions.
And I don't think we can do it justice tonight. So I think let's dive into that in our future sessions here. So again, thank you, Shaunna. Thank you to everyone for attending tonight. Hopefully everyone can attend those 2 next sessions. As I mentioned, this one's been recorded. I will post it online, and I can send you a link to that. I'll also be sending out a survey to get some feedback for tonight that didn't come through the chat here, and hopefully we can build off this for the next couple of sessions. So good start, and looking forward to more.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Nice to virtually meet you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.